Big hey now to everyone out there in Hexaco. Good morning. It is Tuesday, August 18th, 2026, Hex Day 2451. I was in the middle of creating this stream and getting prepped for it, and when you know it, somebody came in and did the old pump-a-rooney. Pump that hex right up. Let's go take a look at that and go see what it's looking like. A little bit of battle going on. Prepping. All right. So it's hard to pin this down because sometimes things move pretty quickly. You can see the chart moving on screen at the moment. Things were pretty quiet. We were down a little bit, maybe break even about 30 minutes, 40 minutes ago. HEX is currently up 20% on the day. A little bit of battle going on back and forth. We see some pretty good volume. Last 5 minutes, 37K. Oh, 30K. Time span changes. 37K. Flipping back and forth. Last hour, 223K. And USD. 6 hours, 243 and 311 the last 24 hours. Again, I got to look at these numbers. I'm kind of crazy. Buy volume's 158K versus sell of 153. So pretty interesting there. That little bit of difference makes so much sense. I'm going to go down to the hourly. Let's go over the hourly on the 5 day. See what this looks like. All right, so we can see we're coming in pretty flat right up until the 0700 hour. Nice little pump up, and now that's continuing. Wicks are expected, right, as the different pools sell down. If you give me 1 second. And I'm back. Yeah, hey, Richie Rich and J Dub. Yeah, that God candle gets sold off pretty quick. You're right about that. I don't know if it was so much a God candle, but it certainly did get sold back down. That's pretty normal, though, right? That would be the case. What do I mean by that? You have all these pools out there. Thousands of these hex pools, and once somebody comes in with a huge buy, they all have to reposition themselves and get ARB down, so that moves pretty quick that way. So that's our hex looking pretty good. Switch over to trading view. So it's been battling the last few days, the 111-day moving average. And we've had plenty of wicks over. So a solid body candle on the daily over the 111. So that's a pretty important level. It matches up with Ethereum. Let's go out to the year on that. You can see that Ethereum has been coming up and testing as well. It's a 111-day moving average. It really looks kind of pretty bullish once it breaks through. And if it flips at 111 to support, let me turn this guy on here. Go back to auto. If it turns it on to support, then it likely goes into some sort of price discovery between here at 1900 and 2600. And so again, we can see them curling down. Bitcoin's just been doing its thing sideways. So yeah, the market's looking pretty good. Feeling kind of bullish. I think I saw somebody actually saying that online on X that they think that we're in the beginning of a bull market for crypto overall. But people say that shit all the time, so take with a grain of salt. same people will come back and tell us it's a bear market too. So that happens. All right, but overall, looking pretty good market wise. I'm way zoomed out. So in terms of what I'm looking at, so not real been out of shape over very very small swings of 5-10%. It's more for me, it's more about looking at the overall and where we're going. So we go back over to the daily just to see what that looks like. Clearly looks to me that if the same type of action continues for another month, we should be up in the 1 cent area. Now here's how that can change, right? For HEX on Pulse Chain, it comes down to buyers and sellers, right? So if like all of us decided we were going to go buy and bought a substantial amount, push that price right up there, and taking the HEX off the market. If we go look at the HEX bonds, let's see where that is. Let's go look at that. Go look at the HEX bonds market. This is a community website. Where do they have that info? Oh, you know what I want to do? I don't want to go here. I want to go over to Analyzer, I think. Well, we got to go get that link. The HEX Analyzer. HEX Calc. Nope, not there. Let me grab that off the other screen in a couple of minutes. But anyways, the supply's coming down. And people can insert more supply at any time. But the amount of HEX that's available on the market is somewhat limited. 1,000 USDC right now, 318,000 HEX. Let's go to the preview. Looks like a bunch of different swaps. Looks like all of it's going through Pulse at this point. Looks like all of it's going through Pulse. What do I mean by that? I'm looking at the tail end of the buys from USDC, and so the USDC gets converted all the way to Pulse on 3 different legs, and then swaps over to HEX. And it looks like 100% of 48, so 48% going through V2, another 20%, 68% going through V2. Now it's changed. So, but you can see the routing and how it goes back and forth. But it's definitely looking at Pulse right now. Looking at Pulse. That's how the orders are being routed. So yeah, I agree with you, Acid. Good to see you. It looks pretty good. Pretty exciting for a HEX market. All right, so I guess what I would say about this morning, kind of a thesis, is the HEX is on the move again. We'll see if it holds, where it goes. This has been a repetitive story, so that's happening, right? We go back over to that chart while I'm discussing this part of it here. And bring that back up on the daily. Again, I've talked about this a bunch of times, but you can look at these pumps as tests of the market. TEST, test, and looking for higher lows, right? And so higher lows, and now we spent some time. We had hit this top. This is what, the 11th, which is about a week ago, and I had 2 or 3 days of downward actions, kind of indecision, but support on the 14th, and took another leg up. There was no substantial sell-off. And then a couple of days later, boom, here we go. Nice big candle. So you could have accumulated. I did see when I was looking at the swaps. Oh, woo, look at that. Look at that, just changed. I had seen in the swaps, we were getting upwards of 360,000 HEX per 1,000 DAI. And just now, as we were sitting here, just updated again, another buy must have gone through. $1,000 USDC gets you less than 300K at the moment. Of course, we can come back in 5 minutes and it'll be back up to 320. Don't know. We have to wait and see what happens with it, and go from there. And yeah. Let me head over to another screen. All right, let's go look at our actuator. Give me 1 second here. I shall return in a moment. We got this little yapper in the background. Hit the likes for the dog. Someday I'll be able to afford my own studio with no dogs. How about that? Maybe. All right. So, just looking overall, Hex appears to be going into another level of price discovery. I think it's reasonable to think that the battle will center around 0.004, 0.005. Looks like they're reasonable levels that might come into play. The TA guys give you much more detail than that, but just real high level. On the bond market, what we're beginning to see is the HTTs sloshing back and forth, haven't been tied to HEX directly, priced in HEX, and so what we're seeing with that is different prices being assigned depending on the amount of time that's left. Right. And so what it's doing is the bond market itself doesn't set the prices. People do. The market does. And so what we see is the prices end up being expressed in a way that show you either discounts or premiums. And what you're able to do from that is kind of expose where, capital agrees or disagrees. Right. And there's all sorts of cats doing different stuff. So it's really hard to track what's going on. What do I mean by that? Well, the HTT 3000s, for instance, are showing up in the bond market as being the best APR at the moment, right? APR is probably not the best way to describe it, but it's far enough out because it's about a year and a half out still that we can say that. But the fixed return is 46%. Right. So by far, that is one of the biggest opportunities. Swap one hex, get 100, get 1.4 ish hex back, and then be able to hold that until redemption day and get 1.4 hex, which is a 46% ROI. But you have to be willing to wait that year and a half. Right. And so what we're seeing is the market kind of express itself. Now, I did see somebody come in and mint a bunch, put a bunch of LP up on 3000s overnight. Also sell a bunch. Some other people sold a bunch. So we have that going on. Best premium continues to be the HTT 8000, and then the best total return 7777. If you're using their website, the Actuator website, what you'll see is that these will change over the day. Right, they move back and forth. Different ones show up on the top line. These are hint cards, if you want to call them that, from the team about what they think through their analysis. Right, yes, it's automated, but it provides that kind of information. For what might be the best total return versus the premium. I.e., good for amplification or for selling, etc. If we just scroll down on their list here to 777s, the reason they're saying the best total return, the Quattro 7s, is there is about 7K in liquidity, again, subject to the movement of the market, which is another thing to kind of cover on that, but 169%. And so it's about double what a Quattro Cinco would be right now. But now, based on estimates only, right? But if we go look at that, the pool isn't tiny, but it's still pretty small. So a couple $100 starts moving the pool around, and so what we're seeing is people come in and allocate against the HTTs that are discounted, depending on the person's time, right? What they're willing to do, and 777. Even though we're talking about it being discounted, it's a long way out. There's a lot of time. Right. I mean, it's 14 years, almost 15 years until that would come due. But in the meantime, that opportunity is there. And you would think at some point when you start talking about curve trading, what I would think is at some point, right? So somebody might take a position in, if they're trying to manage for total return, take a position in the 7777s, and then wait, and it might be several years, but wait until they actually came up in price, and then swap into the next thing that gives them the best return. So they take the cream off the top in terms of ratio, and then kind of move on to the next one. So HEX is leading this entire conversation. And the faster it moves, faster the HTTs move. And when they move, and let's go look at that, the front end real quick, and I'll do a quick update. When they move, it also creates opportunity because, HEX moves fast, right? We just saw it on the, on the little thing, on the chart there. I mean, I was preparing, we hadn't had a big movement, and HEX all of a sudden is up 10%. Then I go to do the stream and it's down a little bit. It's up 8%. And then, now as we're sitting here, go back full screen, now it's up 25%. So this is moving pretty fast in terms of, it's hard to kind of watch what's happening and be sure like a certain percentage or whatever. But if we go look at the curve itself and the different HTTs that are out there, notice that we're not yet seeing on this, because there's a little bit of delay on my end as far as how fast these will come up in price. What that represents is opportunity, because HEX is now worth more than these HTTs, and so they're in the background. Pools will eventually ARB, but people will take advantage of the opportunities and come in and do the swaps before the ARBs hit them. So there is that opportunity. Again, 3,000 is almost 108K in liquidity as of a few minutes ago, and but selling at 0.68 HEX. It's crazy. Like I could not have predicted what the numbers would be. I tried to predict what I thought was reasonable, but the market's going to do what it's going to do. And so you see with the nearest HTT at 2460, it's at 0.98, which makes sense. It's only about a week or so before that's going to be redeemable 1-to-1 to HEX, so it should be pretty close. But then we see a drop down to 9.6 on the 2490, 2520, 969. Little bit of diversion here in terms of not just strictly going down because these are smaller pools, but 2550 is at 0.97, 2580, 0.97, 2610, 0.95. What this represents on the front end is for a reasonably sized swap, you can nearly get 1-to-1 HEX if somebody was to mint. And what you're doing is you're giving, if you're the mint and then you swap back to HEX, what you're doing is you're giving up during that period of time control over the collateral. And if you don't come back, you'll end up losing the collateral, in that you don't lose it, but you had gotten HTTs, but you don't have, you haven't come back and retired the HTTs. And I'll be doing a stream on retirement of HTTs, and then also undelegating and transferring HSIs. That's something that'll be coming up to kind of describe that. But in any case, you can see that in general, the closest the HTT is to redemption, the higher the price. And then you see like weird little anomalies, particularly when we get to the higher end of the curve, where the 3000 is down at 0.68, but the 3030 is at 0.86, which is a pretty substantial difference in price. And but the liquidity is low. It's low. Right, so this really can't take, this is more of a reference pool than anything else. It really can't take more than about probably $60, $70 worth of trading, and it would bring it right in line, right, with the rest of them. So this is more, all of these are all about an infrastructure play, longer term, to support HEX staking, because these can't exist unless somebody went out and staked HEX. So for this $50,000 or $60,000 in LP, somebody had to actually stake HEX and then put up LP, to actually make this come to fruition. So you have that going on. So the front end is the discounts are pretty spread out. Again, the headline is the 3000s, it being a 44, 45%, 46% fixed return. It's a pretty big deal to be able to do that over a short period of time. Now, the question as we watch it is, when will the market decide that's too cheap, right? So as we get to each of the redemptions, we'll be watching to see what happens with them and see how they compress to 1 hex. Some people will take the trade. We did see for several hours yesterday, the 2460s were trading at a 3% premium, or yeah, I guess that'd be the right way to say it, because it was like 1.03 hex for a 2460. So those are the types of things people will be able to take advantage of. And now at this point, with liquidity being low, prices being low, not as exciting. But you can see the mechanics of it. And so, what are we showing for, a safe swap, 2% of the pool for 2460 is $185. And so you got to think, well, when that's $20,000, does that change your opinion about whether or not moving through these pools makes sense? And I think it does. When it's, 10x, 100x from here, price-wise, in the fiat value in relation to the transactions, the average transaction cost people are willing to do, and all of a sudden, you can take advantage of a 3%, 5% type of a curve trade, and it makes sense to earn 5% profit on 20,000, right? But not as much sense on $5, right? So I get it, but we're just seeing this thing develop over time, and opportunity abounds for those who are willing to get involved, are interested, and for the rest of us, popcorn, lots and lots of popcorn, and so, and with that, let's go look and see. Yeah, so even as we're talking, we continue to see this action on the old HEX. That's on the hourly. Look at the 5 minutes, see what the battle is. With the 5-minute chart, you can see it coming up. It came up, and no one really reacted once we got to the 3-1 level, but it did go all the way up to what we at 0.0036, and then it did react and come back down, and now it's being bought back up to the 3.6. Will that continue? I don't know. We'll see. We shall see. All right, let's get back to our regularly scheduled program. Okay, let's look at that long end of the curve. Let's go see what we've got out there. Now, this has been incredibly different as well. I know I probably say the same stuff all the time, but just looking at the fixed returns out here, again, the 777 at 169% is pretty huge. But these are a long time away. They're 14 years out. Sevens, 7900s, 8000s. They're way out there. Way out there, but there's still opportunities for those who are interested, and I would not have guessed they would have been that low, right? But they're heavily discounted. Even the 7000s at 0.40, heavily discounted per hex, in my opinion. But that's the thing, right? If somebody really wanted to accumulate through this mechanism, they can. And they will. And I think what we're going to see expressed is on the front end. It's hard. Maybe it's hard for people to realize what we're talking about with Actuator when they're looking at a 7,000 or whatever, and it's out 13, 14 years, because it's not now. But I think when we start looking at the front end, and we're looking at these, like the 2460 pool, I think that's going to be something you can demonstrate to people. Like you guys, if you're watching the future streams, when we see the redemptions go through, we'll be like, yep, they're 1-to-1 hex. And you'll be like, well, if I could have gotten 2% overnight, why wouldn't I have done that? Well, it's not worth it because it's too small. Okay. All right. So if the market changes, and instead this is at, some weird like 0.9, I don't know why anybody do that, but let's say it was 0.9, you can realize 10% overnight. Even if it is only at a couple $100, why wouldn't you do that, right? So we're going to see how the market actually prices these, whether it brings them to 1-to-1 or whatever. And now the reason that's important, as I was getting at, is because when we're looking at the long end of the bond market, then that should open up people's eyes. Go, I see. So in fact, the HTTs, as we watch them redeem month over month, go to 1-to-1 on the DEX, and if they don't, people get a discount, and then they redeem and get 1-to-1 hex, and then perhaps that will instigate additional activity, right? We'll see that happening. So those discounts remain pretty decent on the long end, but you got to be willing to serve some of the time, and the core mechanism that supports the behavior of the thing going to one with hex is the fact that at redemption they can be claimed 1-to-1 for hex on that day. That's what the big deal is. And I know that people are working this curve because I can see that happening. Let's go over and look at mints. This is from a few minutes ago, but we did see 450,000 new HTTs minted in the last 24 hours. It varies. It goes, nonstop. Again, this is DeFi, immutable. Users decide, so somebody could come in right now and have added some additional minting. Looks like the Quattro Cincos were leading, with what, 169,000 ish. Let's see where we're at. Yeah, 169, 469. So 169,000 of the Quattro Cincos being minted. Looks like our next highest was the 3,000s, which that surprised me a little bit too. But there is a little bit of time in the farms, and then people might, meaning. So I was a little surprised to see more minting right now on the 3,000s. Because we are close, but it's still a year and a half, right? So there's time to earn, and so somebody could, set up a stake to 3,000 if they're doing shorties anyways, and mint those, and then actually put them to work during this period of time. In the next 2 months in the farms, they can earn. I know Johnny Chaos Theory, they're high, it's high liquidity, relative liquidity, so it's got deeper pockets. You also see people actually mint them and swap out to something else, based on their strategy, which of course, creates the activity that we're seeing on the different charts when that swapping takes place. And then third place was the 6,000s. They continue to be minted. The 6,000s are solid in the middle, right? Because we go look at those 6,000s, time-wise, it's solid. It's about 10 years out. So not 15, 9.7 years. So the 6,000s might be attractive to people that are looking at the 2030 time frame, right? Because this one, let's say 6,000s are 2036 is when they end, 9.7 years. So reasonable stake to earn over 10 years, exposure to the period of time where we expect that the payouts might be going up with the OA T-shares petering out. So, yeah, it's clearly somebody's minting them. So we've seen that. And that isn't new. It's a pretty regular thing. Let's go look at our actuator balances. So we're up to 336 million. And again, this is a moving target. Now, why do people even put actuator into the vaults? Well, they put them into the vaults because they're anticipating somebody's going to do minting, and if they're going to do the minting, then they pay the 1% fee. And so if you're in the vault, you actually get part of those mints as your fee for having had the actuator, making it sticky and putting it in the vaults. So you can see the 3,000s are still around 33 million, 4,000s 22 million, 5,000s 39 million. But the count's been steadily coming up, and by the end of next year, well, October of 2027, all of the actuator would have been distributed. It is deflationary. I am looking for the number for the burn on it. If I'm not mistaken, about over 1 million's been burned at this point. And burn takes place because when you go to deposit over here, you have to deposit for 90 days minimum, and there's a penalty if you remove it early. And so there's a little bit of deflation in that. People can remove early, and then they end up paying a little bit of penalty, and the actuator gets burned. But 1 million out of 1 billion is not that much. So I mean, but it's it affects things overall as far as scarcity goes. Probably the biggest story here has been the 8,000s continue to climb. I mean, they're up to 62 million now. on the 8,000s, and and how that'll progress. But remember, we got over 100 million on the 7,000s with 108 million. So I don't know if we're going to see a rotation at some point from that to 8,000s, or people are just going to say, no, I'm going to stay in the 7,000s and just keep collecting them. So that may continue to happen. So we're seeing that. So capital chooses what they want to do. They're going to put into the HTT. Maybe they think they're going to mint or plan to mint, or which one they think a lot of other people are going to mint. That's why you see the 8,000s coming up, because people, are front running the idea that 8,000s will be minted in great quantity, and they want to get more of that. And as we're watching these charts, HTTs are future HEX, right? Future HEX. And we'll look at the HEX chart, right? It's very difficult to put a price on what an actuator token should be, right, in terms of price. And the reason for that is because it's paying out in HEX, but it's future HEX. We don't know what the value is going to be. And so I think the actuator token's almost unpriceable. You see it is up 17% in USD. Now, why did it have this big jump up, right? Why did it have this big jump? Let's look and see what we had for volume. So we had 384 volume in the last hour, 1,006, 2 in 24 hours. Which isn't that much, but it's priced in both Pulse and HEX. That's the main pulse, right? And so that drives it up in value. If we go look at the Pulse chart, we can just see it's been a steady incline since mid-July, about a month. We're slowly climbing up in value up to 55 pulse per actuator. And then somebody was asking about whether or not actuator should be equal to 1x. Let's see what the pool looks like for that. I don't know if that makes better sense to be measuring this way or not, but actuator token currently is 0.18 HEX, and it's been over the same period. It's been staying a little steady, about in that range with HEX is ranging back and forth in price. So it's not losing per se overall against HEX, which is interesting. So maybe that is a more valid way to price it. It's certainly moving up that way. And so we can see that. I mean, this pool is, again, these are small pools, 5K. The actuator token operates both as first as a reward token where people will sell it as they earn it, and then as a revenue token. As a reward token, I can kind of price out in my mind why I think it's valuable, because you're earning a certain amount of fiat value or HEX equivalent value, for farming. That part on the revenue side, I can, and on the income side, excuse me, or for the rewards. But on the revenue side, very hard to price something that pays forever, assuming people use the protocol, right? So there's high risk in that, right? That people might not use the protocol in the future. Right? I don't think that, but I mean, that's always a possibility to not use it as much. But again, very difficult to price that out. My guess is, just looking at the pool, wow. I don't know if somebody reduced this pool or what, or if it just was taken out. Somebody must have removed, but this one is a little bit lower than I would expect it. But there's about 4 million actuator in this pool. I think the Pulse pool is about 8 in that one. Let's go look. Yeah, so 8.5, so about 12 million. There's probably about 20 million actuator on the market, which is not very much, right? Not very much. The whale is 10 million. And if you only have about 20 million on the market, very difficult to get this other than going through LP. I mean, you could buy it off the market, sure, smaller bits. But if you tried to come in here and let's price out what 10 million would be. So 10 million right now is $6,500, right? That would be a whale position. But this entire pool is what, 11K, so that'd be half the pool. And so you would at minimum 2x the price, maybe even 3x the price of Actuator if you tried to get a whale position just simply by swapping. So that's going on there. Let's see. All right. Let's go look at farms. See where we're sitting over here. So if you ever want to see the farms, you come up here at the top. You go to earn farms. I'll bring that up. So far, staying pretty steady. This kind of makes sense, right? Because I just looked at that HEX price, the actuator in terms of HEX, and it's ranging, but it's fairly sideways. So what does that mean? Well, as compared to the pools and the earning, the APRs have been pretty steady, right? So the highest APR is the 5,000s at 26.2. Here's the 6,000s, 25%. Might explain why they were minted. Perhaps somebody wanted to come in and provide LP. Third highest is 4,000, HTT 4,000 at 22.7%. The 7,000s 18.2%, and the 3,000s are paying 17.3%, and that's calculated off the value of the actuator token you get, right? And it's an APR, so it's an annualized value, right? It's not today. It's over a year if the same conditions existed, but it gives you a way to kind of monitor what's happening with that if you're in those farms. All right, and so let's talk just for a moment about what price discovery means. I mean, just like talk about that for a moment. Let's go to the 2460 and just see what this list looks like. So I'm going to pull up the chart on Deck Screener. You can see 2460 is reacting to the HEX price, so it's up 23% on very little volume, right? Big candle in USD. Let's go to HEX terms though. Okay, so not such a big deal in HEX terms. We'll go to full screen. Take a look at that. We're going to go to the daily. All right. So in HEX terms, the price discovery is about, we're talking about the HTTs, that is, it's about what is the value of an HTT versus HEX, right? Now this one here is the 2460. And so the 2460 did start, looks like it started on this candle. It opened at 0.95 back on the 18th of July. Well, it probably existed before that because I know somebody had put up liquidity and they'd taken it down, and that goes back 6 or 7 months. So it's just probably that the chart isn't showing it. But if we just assume for this this particular bar, it's the first one, we would say it started at 0.95, right? And so then the market gets to discover, well, how much is that worth to you? And at one point, somebody sold it down all the way to 0.90, which means that was a 10% swing, right? So waiting, a month gets you 10% more HEX. So if you were able to, you can see if somebody was actually trading this, right? And they had minted the HTTs, and it was up here at the 1.02 when they sold it down. Then they're able to get more HEX back. And then when the price gets really, really low, buyers can buy it and be willing to hold it for a month and then turn it back in for 1-to-1, right? So somebody would have done that. Now these are lower liquidity pools, but I think it demonstrates the actual, actually what the use case is, the utility of this is that different people are doing different things at different times. They might want to get value out and go do something, and that provides an opportunity to somebody else if they want to utilize, the system and accumulate the HTTs. So you have a little bit of price discovery here. It did get up to, as I mentioned, 1.04. I think it peaked almost at 1.05 HEX a couple days ago, and now it's come back down. Somebody must have seen that, or it's a reaction in the market, because the market is linked together. With these HTTs, you have to think of them as one big market, not necessarily individual assets, because they're all tied together with liquidity. But there are opportunities, right? So you have that. So there's that type of price discovery on the HTTs. And of course, if we go way out on the other end, 8,000 is trying to figure out what it's supposed to be doing. It's also reacted. It's up 25% in relation to USD. Now, this one, I'm going to again, if I look at this chart, this is price discovery that's mimicking HEX. What is the value of HEX, and that's being transmitted through here. But we're going to switch over to HEX value and go full screen and look at this. And so HTT 8000s, let's see. All right, they opened at 0.90x. Add a little bit of a bump up to 1.04. Bots and whatnot come in and they grab some of the supply and they brings it up. But rational players understand this could be worth 1-to-1 with HEX in the future. And so really the direction is downwards. It came all the way from that 9.0 level down to the 0.47 level. And then it came back up to 0.60. Now we're over here at 0.5. So the market's trying to determine how to price this, and right now it's at a premium compared to the other HTTs. So it's affected a little bit, maybe a lot, by the fact that only so many of them exist right now. You have to go stake HEX in order to create more of them. So it's a bit limited, and so if you really want to get ready for the farms and have HTT 8000s for the farms, you have to get them somewhere, and that's kind of keeping the price up a little bit. Because some people will be like, listen, I want to go do a small position. They're going to swap in rather than go stake, even though it's a better deal to stake, because they just don't want the hassle. To spend the time to create a small stake in order to print the HTTs, so they go swap on the market, and so keeps it a little bit higher than it would normally be. But we'll watch this as we get to the farms. But once we get to the farms, I would expect this to get in line with something like the 7000s, right? Because 7000 is about 0.40. All right, 777 is 0.37, 79 is 0.37. So it wouldn't be unreasonable to think that the 8000 should be down at 0.36, which is why we keep saying that, keep suggesting they might be at a premium, and why, using them for amplification makes sense. But again, if you use them for amplification, that kind of infers you're going to mint them and swap them out. And if your target is to get in the farms, well, swapping out of them doesn't help, right? Some people might just be waiting for the low prices to turn around and buy them at 0.36, 0.40 in order to enter the farms, or not. But let's go look at a different HTT that's in price discovery, which is the 7000s. Again, I'm going to pull this up, switch over to HEX. It's also getting an increase transmitted through HEX. One of the interesting things about the 7000s is people put up a lot of value into the LPXs, and so the LPXs are building backing to support the price, but I think it does dull the upward motion a little bit. I do think that's the case. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if I went and looked at this candle here on the day. Let's see. Let's go to the hour. I wouldn't be surprised if some of these transactions for selling are actually LPX, right? Converting. I know people put up pairs with icosahedron, the other derivatives, and so you have that. But nevertheless, it's still following upwards, and that backing does support the price with the other token in the LPX. And what it does is, if it doesn't follow HEX as closely, which is another thing we've been observing, then it stays artificially low in ratio, right? Which then provides other people opportunity who might be interested in that. Let's take this off here. I'm going to go full screen on this guy. Let's look to see the 7000s. We're in HEX terms. I have auto and log on for this. Let me turn off our volatility. All right, so you can see this has been fairly ranging. I mean, let's see, the 7000s got all the way to 0.75 at one point, way up here. And I would think that half a HEX makes sense, but again, this is the market. Market's going to decide what this time value is, right? And so instead, what the market's done is, as HEX has been going up since mid-July, the value has been coming down, maybe because people are moving out, but maybe just the math, as well. So we see this kind of going into price discovery. And then what I would think is that, again, this is a long way out. This is like 14 years, right? But maybe it's a little bit less than 12 years. But what you would think would happen is later on, this price will recover and start moving up towards 1-to-1 hex as it becomes valued. Now, the best opportunities might be now, but the best perceived opportunities, because most of us are thinking short term. I mean, how many of us seriously are worried about 15 years from now, other than the fact that we do Quattro Cincos? No idea what the state of the world will be, the prices will be, and all the rest. So this is definitely long-term strategy stuff when people are looking at these HTTs. And for whatever reason, somebody valued the idea. Maybe there was a time where amplification was being led by 7,000s. So a lot of this could have been spooling of new t-shirts being created. But that's what we're watching. We're watching to see what's going to happen with it. And so, these different there's these opposing incentives on the market, right? Some people want to buy them, and hold for the long term. Some want to make new t-shirts with them. Some just want to get cheaper once they have units. Someday, if not already, people will be managing based on APR and for income purposes and ROIs. And in the real bond market, I shouldn't say real, but in the TradFi bond market, that's what goes on. People move back and forth. They play those opposing forces in order to get more of what they want. And so when I look at something and I'm like, hey, I really think the price should be around 50, 0.50, and it's down at 0.40, that is a disagreement. I disagree, right? But that equals opportunity, right? And then there is no perfect answer here. People can use their own strategies, right? And decide for themselves what they want to get out of all this, right? So what would I be watching? What do I think I'm watching? I'm going to be watching the 3000s really hard, right? I mean, the idea that the 3000s, we'll pop that chart up, are so cheap at the moment in terms of HEX. I'll be watching that particularly over the next year and a half. So again, like, how many people are really worried about the next year and a half, right? Versus, getting their bills paid this month. So I'll be watching here on the 3000s because, we saw another dagger down. The farms end next month. Is it possible we'll get a much steeper discount? Yes, it's possible. So I'll be watching the 3000s. I'm going to be watching the 8000s as well, to see exactly what happens with their ratio and how it ends up settling out as compared to the 7900s and the 7777s. We'll be doing that, and then see how long people will be doing Quattro Cinco stakes versus 8,000 stakes. Right, 8,000 is a few days shy of a Quattro Cinco now. So if I go out to our staking panel, I'm just going to do a new delegated stake, and I'm going to put 100,000. Let's see if 8,000 is on this list now. I'll put it in as a 8,000 here. And look, okay, so 100,000 HEX going out today. 8,000 is a 5,548 day stake. So it's about 7 days shy of a Quattro Cinco. But there's liquidity at that point, right? So I could do a Quattro Cinco and mint the 8,000s from it, but then that Quattro Cinco just sits out there waiting until we get to the day. I can't earn on a daily basis with it because it's an emergency end stake threat. And so then what ends up having, or risk, it ends up sitting out there just waiting. I get my initial HTTs, but if I stake to 8,000 every day, I get more HTTs available on the market. It's a little bit nuance to the system. That's why I'm looking at it. So right now, yeah, I'm okay with giving up 7 days at the moment to do an 8,000 staked at the 8,000. Right, gives me 6.43 T-shares, which is quite a bit as compared to 2,000. In that month, it's a pretty big amount. So yeah, so I'm willing to do that. So then my question is when does somebody create a new HTT on the front end? When do people say, nah, I'm not going to go out, because these days will come down. So every day that passes, the number of days staked to 8,000 gets lower because we're getting closer. And so will people be at, I don't know, 5,500? Will they be, nah, I don't want to do an 8,000 because I want a full Quattro Cinco? You know, where do we get to that point? And or do we, or don't we? Don't know. You have to wait till I see what the community does with it. But at some point, I would kind of expect to see another HTT created to facilitate that on the far long end. Is it 8,100, 8,200, 80, I don't know. But we'll watch it and see. So we'll be watching the 8,000s in the near term, see what happens with the farms, see what happens with the price, see what happens with the ratio. So that'll be near term. See how it compares out to the others. And then, of course, probably the next big thing is to be watching the 2460s and what happens with redemption, because that's not that far out, right? So redemption's not far from here. And again, it's at 0.98 hex at this point. All right, so I think, let's see if this chart actually loads up. They probably got too many going now. There we go. So we see the 2460s, again, reacting to the HEX price going up. So up 23% USD type of terms. Let's look at that again. Let's put on HEX. We'll be watching this to see what happens with redemption. Does it redeem above or below? What does that mean? Kind of analyze that as we go. So the market in terms of this stuff, the HTTs, it's taking shape. I think it's moving from experiment to actual activity, because I see some of the users out there going back and forth between them. And so the goal here, I think, again, I don't think you can force anything anyways, but the goal isn't to force the curve, but to see what the market does. Give the market enough infrastructure to decide on its own what the value is of HEX across time, right? That's the whole concept. What's the value of HEX across time? That's what we're seeing here. Let's take a quick look at our related tokens. What do we got going on over here? This does not include all the pools. It's just a reference point to HEX. It's loading up here, so let's make sure you guys can see it on your screen. You can. So we're seeing an uptrend on the Helgo, the Hedron, the Deci, the Com, all coming up a little bit. The Maxi in HEX terms, so we're seeing that come up. Liquidity's grown a little bit across these pools with HEX, these are all V2 pools off of PulseX, is what I'm referencing. The Helgo activity is up, but all of them look to be in line with the pump, so no specific action outside of that pump. When we look in terms of Deci and Maxi and the estimated returns on investment, both look to be about 133% in the 130 range. Deci 133% estimated return on investment at this time. Maxi 132%. But it's variable because we don't know what the payouts are going to be, which is different than how we calculate the HTTs. Because I know that if I get 2 HTTs for 1 hex, I'm getting 100%, right? Because when I get to redemption, in the case of Deci, I have what has already been logged, Deci and Maxi, whatever's been logged as previous rewards plus an estimate for the future, though they've stayed pretty steady, right? So I'll say that. And so this translates on Deci to a 21% APR and Maxi at 12%. So definitely out there, and I know that some people do take exposure to these products. So that's happening as well. All right, let's see what old hex come down a little bit in terms of over the last hour. You have to be really careful with these green red candles. The green red colors. Sometimes when these flash red, it doesn't necessarily mean that things have gone down. Might have gone up. It's just in the time frame that's being measured. It's there. So let's leave this on full. Let's go to chat, see what we got on chat, what people are talking about out there. I'm kind of ignoring the chat this time. All right, not too much. Not too much being asked of out here. I saw Richie Rich a little bit earlier and J Dub. Acid. Hit the likes. Yes, please keep it crypto. Hit the likes. David, good to see you. What are you looking at? Ores, good to see you. Acid Thunder said 2 months of green. Yep, that's nice, huh? It's way different in the past. We haven't seen that for a while. Colner, good to see you. Oh, yes, Crispy Some Inner Godwell. Yeah, the timing is curious. I'm getting a little paranoid. Getting a little paranoid. Pedro, good to see you. Cindy Lou. It's a morning. I see the Hex Farmer out there. B-Fam, good to see you. Pocalypse. T-shirts are so scarce. I hope you all understand that. Better get some. You've been warned. Yeah. Well, that's, listen, nobody agrees with you. I should say nobody. The people probably watching this stream agree with you. Probably. And that the T-shirts are pretty valuable. Again, that's one of the things I think that draws me to look at the Actuator protocol and be involved in it a little bit is the idea that I can get more T-shirts out there in the long time frame. And currently, I do have to get a T-shirt report out this week. I haven't done one for about a week or so. But things don't change much there. We just know the T-shirt rate's going up, so we're pretty sure about that. And but here's the thing: combine. We'll go look. I'm going to go look right now. We're going to go over to look at the prices on this. But we're in a sweet spot where I think reasonable people can procure a T-shirt at a reasonable price. But at what price is a T-shirt too expensive? Right, for the average person. I'm guessing that for the average person, we start getting into it's expensive when we get to 1K, 2K kind of range. But they ain't that far. They're not that far away, right? So, I don't know. Maybe other people watching this, no, people willing to spend 10K for a T-shirt, but I don't know too many people got 10K, right? So that are willing to go dump it into crypto. Sure, people have been around, have Hex, may have it, but look at what they're doing. They ain't staking, right? So anyways, my point is for people who are interested in minting, this is a perfect storm. And when I say minting, I mean mining of Hex and minting it. This is kind of like a perfect storm time. We're moving out of the lower prices. The T-share rate is fairly low. Hex is still fairly cheap. You probably get a T-share for under $200. We can look at that. So that's fairly reasonable. But at 5X, all of a sudden it's like, how are you going to get those T-shirts if you desire them? And so for people who are really interested in the T-shirts, they're going to get scarce because, no, maybe they have all the Hex and they're going to do it. I don't know. But it just seems to me that it's going to get expensive quick. And somebody asked about this the other day. 10,000 was the high for a T-shirt in the past. And now if we look at, it's just a rough number for those actually calculating it. But if you look at a T-shirt today, if we get back to all-time high, it's not 10,000. It's 25,000. Right? And so, yeah, it'd be very tough for people to build the T-shares later with new value if they didn't already have exposure with HEX. And that is just going to compound this whole thing in terms of the walled garden and staking. So, Richie saying, nice candle this morning. I agree with you. We are pumping our. And Iron Horse, another green day. Now, since we've said that, let's go look at some of our friends. Some of our friends in crypto. Let me take this off. What are we seeing on? So we see the HEX right now, somewhere around 20%. Again, not unexpected that as price goes up, different things are changing. People get to sell back down. PulseX always depends on what the balance is. PulseX up 15% versus Pulse. That's been pretty good. What's the ratio look like on that? All right, so it's been continuing to gain against Pulse. So since all the way back in June, the old PulseX. So that continues. The Ink not too shabby, 15%. Ink's an interesting play because I don't know how interested Richard is really in Ink, meaning Richard Hart. I don't know how interested he's in that, and we know the emissions are low. There's not a lot of new ink coming on the market at the moment, and so we have that going on, and it's just kind of going up into the right now in terms of USD. Let's look at Pulse. Pulse terms has also been going up to the right. And what's interesting about this is a very small group of people or a big player could substantially move this price because there's not that much volume. This is more like a lever play. Like somebody's going to pull a lever to make this go way up if they want it to go way up. But then I think it's going to act more like a meme than maybe some other things. We'll go take a look at the ProveX and see what my chart shows. Levels. All right, so looking at the level, so the ProveX came way down in price in USD. Look at that, came all the way down here to 4 zeros and a 3, and then it has climbed itself back up, so about double up at the 4 zeros and a 6. So climbing back into the sacrifice ranges, up 7%. So it's following along too, and it's green. So maybe somebody has broken the algorithm here in order to figure out a way to get all these things to go up at one time. Maybe that's what's happening. HEX 19% plus. PulseX 14%. Different chart for HEX. Ink 15%. ProveX 7%. We got the Ptaga at 60%. These are community type of tokens. Peacock, the meme. BTGC 12. What else here is interesting? I did see let's see all trending tokens. I did see HTTs up here the other day. Somebody pointed that out to me. So I'm going to go 24 hours. Last 24 hours top. Let's see if HTTs show up. They were on page 2. One of them was out there. I'm not sure why it showed up exactly. Like sometimes when I look at this thing, I don't know why some of the trends actually occur. I guess I could read, maybe figure it out based on volume or whatever. But a lot of activity. Oh, the Finvesta. Look at the Finvesta. Yes, I don't see any HTTs up here at the moment. I've been ranked by volume, of course. I guess I could put a filter or something on this to find it. But I will belay that. All right, let's go back over to the dashboard on Actuator for a moment. Nothing's really changed here. Best total returns, Quattro 7, 8,000's best premium, and the 3,000's best APR. All right, one final question. Hey, Laughter, what's going on? Oh, hi, I've been away from Pulse Chain for a while, letting my HEX stakes and core RH coins alone. I'm assuming alone. Question, have PulseX liquidity firms been abandoned? No. I have provided liquidity for the last 2 years. Yeah, you can go find them. Right. I don't know what your entry was and what wallet, of course, blah, blah, blah. So they have not been abandoned. PulseX V1 is in operation. PulseX V2 is in operation. Of course, you need to know which wallet address you were using. And so you're going to want to go over and look at that. And it makes a difference if you put it in farms. You didn't mention farming. Well, it makes a difference if you put it in farms or not, because you'll need to go to the farm site on PulseX first to go see that, if that's the case, and see what you have. But otherwise, if you're just trying to locate an LP, you go to the address that the LP was initially set up on, and you may have to do a search to find the LP, right? And that would just mean, click the button that says search for it, and then put in the pair. And then if you have an LP token, it'll show it. But you have to be careful about V1, V2. If you're doing V1, you need to select V1. If you were doing V2, you select V2. And in that way, you can click, once you have that pool up, click manage, it'll add it to your list. It's just that sometimes the explorers will forget, if you haven't done it in a long time, that you have the LP there. But yeah, you can go find them, go see them, go decide what you want to do. Observe what's happened with them. You might do, what might be fun if it's been 2 years for you, is to go back to the original transaction, get the amounts and the dollar values at that time, and then get the current amounts and dollar values, and just throw them into one of the calculators or into AI and have it calculate your returns. Give you an idea of what your returns in units might have been, and also USD. But that's where you can go find that liquidity. So it's out there, and of course hex stakes are still out there as well. So, and there's a whole bunch of tools. Probably the best way to get hex information goes to go to go.hex.com or hex.com and go there and get the information from the source. But there are additional tools. Okay. All right. Now, I don't know if anybody else saw the magic happen, but as we've been sitting here, right, remember a moment ago I had mentioned the 7777s as the best total return. But while we've been sitting here, it switched to 6666. So maybe somebody went and took some action, maybe just slightly changed. They're pretty close in price. But that's what I mean about the dashboards, to be able to watch it. So. Yeah, left the farm APIs. You're saying that you can see liquidity on farms, but APY is very low. That's true. It is low. Emissions were cut a couple of years ago, so it's been a much lower emission of ink, and that's why those are so much lower. Maybe another day I'll cover that. With that, let's go ahead and end the stream. Thanks, guys, for joining me. A little bit over an hour. We'll end the stream. Play the outro. You have any questions, comments? Hit the like, subscribe, send them in.
Yo, T, urgent hex buy signal. Charts flaming hot.
Golden ratio, huh? That's how legends stack T-shares.
Get them while they're crispy, folks. This window won't stay open long.
Stake smart. Win big. Time rewards those who act.
Stay crispy, Hexicans.
You gotta move it, move it. Feel the rhythm of the blockchain.